The question has come up again, are disabled Americans being cheated? Our next guest recently wrote an article on that subject. Margot Roosevelt is a journalist. She writes for the Orange County Register, writing about the Southern California economy. She's also written for the Washington Post, Time Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, and others, and she is a fellow of the Los Angeles Institute for the Humanities at the University of Southern California. So first of all, Margot, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
And secondly, you recently wrote about the question of whether the disabled are being cheated. And what did you find?
Well, the narrative has been frequently that it's the opposite, that the disabled are getting onto Social Security in many cases when they don't deserve it. But the fact of the matter is that many people apply for a disability and they cannot get a hearing in time before they even die or go bankrupt or get homeless. They can't get a hearing from the Social Security Administration.
So how many people, I mean, I assume some people apply and get through the system, that's my understanding, but the ones who don't and want to appeal have an enormous wait. First of all, how long is that wait?
The wait has ballooned to an average of 633 days. This has happened since 2010, when the Republican Congress decided to freeze the Social Security operating budget. And as a result of that, the staff has been cut and the administrative judges don't have the time to deal with all the applications. And this is coming at the very time when the baby boomer generation has moved into its most disability-prone years, which are in the 50s and 60s. So, that's what happened.
So we have a growing population of people who are applying for benefits. We have a reduction in the budget. And by the way, for those who don't know, Social Security does not contribute to the deficit. It has to be self-funded, meaning funded from contributions to the Social Security program, and it already had very low administrative costs. So the Republican Congress has, you say, frozen the administrative budget, and you also said that you have, that there is a pool now of more than 1 million Americans, 1.1 million Americans waiting for a hearing before an administrative law judge. Did that surprise you when you discovered that?
I found it astonishing. I mean, it's just, these are people who have cancer, or they're mentally ill, or they've been in car accidents, they're in wheelchairs, and they cannot get any kind of wage replacement, even though many of them, and most of them, all of them, have paid into the Social Security system by deductions from their paychecks in their jobs over decades in most cases.
You know, Margot Roosevelt of the Orange County Register, you make a tremendous point there, which is that, it's an insurance program. You pay into it with the reasonable expectation that it will be there for you should you need it. And in this case, we're not just talking, in fact, we're not now talking about retirement at all. We're talking about disability, which is people who fall under unfortunate circumstances after having worked. So, one of the we've covered the topic before on this show. The statistics have gotten much worse over time, but one of the things, in addition to the statistics that I really appreciated about your reporting here, was that you talk about real live human beings and what they're going through as a result of these policies. Maybe if you would, you can tell us a little bit about one or two of the people you met.
One of the people I interviewed was a woman who has worked for 2 decades in a whole bunch of different jobs. She started at age 15 selling popcorn and in a movie theater, and then she worked as an administrative assistant at a mortgage company, and she worked as a call center customer service representative at the AAA. She's worked her whole life, even though she was born with Crohn's disease and quite a severe case of it. She's had 7 operations in recent years, which each of them removes part of her intestine. And the doctors say she really can't work anymore, and she, can't go very long without going to the bathroom. That's what happens when you have Crohn's disease. Anyway, she applied, and like 80% of the people who apply to disability, she was turned down. And then she appealed this, and now she's been waiting 2 years to get a hearing before an administrative judge. And that's the tragedy, is that so many of the people who are waiting for these hearings, they can't afford to go without income, and they have no income as a result of their accident or their disease or whatever. She is married and she has a husband, so he has helped pay off the mortgage on their mobile home, so at least she's not homeless. But a lot of people are going homeless and are going bankrupt, and many of the people I interviewed, that's the case.
And let's go back to one statistic you mentioned. What percentage of people who apply for Social Security initially get turned down and need to ask for a hearing?
So the paperwork required for disability has gone through the roof as Congress has erected more and more hurdles to trying to get disability. So now sometimes you have to submit thousands of pages of medical records and documents from your previous workplace that show, and documents from experts showing you can't do any job, not just the job you used to do. So it's really hard for people who are very ill to get all these documents together and to understand the regulations at the same time when there's nobody at the Social Security office who's helping them. So what's happened with the budget cuts, and even though the budget was frozen, this basically means an 11% reduction if you count for inflation. So take Massachusetts. Massachusetts has had a 15 to 20% reduction in the field staff. So people are going into these offices, and nobody will talk to them. They say, go over to that desk and call the 800 number. But guess what? The time for answering Social Security phones have quintupled since 2010 as a result of all these Republican budget cuts. So it's very hard for people to get help and figure out what they need to do to apply. And that's why 4 out of 5 people are initially turned down when they apply.
And if you listen to some of the politicians, particularly the Republicans, talk about this, they make it sound as if it's easy to get, that you just have to complain. I mean, I think it was Senator Rand Paul a couple of months ago said, oh, if you complain that your back hurts a little bit, you get this benefit, and then you don't have to work. They make it sound like it's a bunch of freeloaders on this program, on taking these benefits, and that somehow these are such generous benefits that people can just, to use an old-fashioned expression, live the life of Riley on them. But that's not the case either, is it?
Well, the average benefit is about $1,100. So imagine paying your rent, your food, your transportation, your medical copays, and whatever else you have to pay for on $1,100 a month. I mean, it's pitiful. It's barely enough to live on for many people. So, and if you don't have enough income, if you haven't worked for 5 out of the last 10 years, then you don't even qualify for Social Security disability, you have to get something called supplemental SSI income, and that is for very poor people who have less than $2,000 in assets. So they only get like $560 a month. So it's pitiful what people are getting, given that they have mostly paid into the system for decades.
And you know, one of the things that seems so tragic to me about it is, there are so many things that seem tragic. I mean, the notion that in our society, in this day and age, that anybody could be okay with people winding up homeless or dying or, you know, having other tragic things happen because they can't get to a program that they've paid for. It just seems incredibly shocking. It shouldn't happen to anybody, much less people who have been working for a long time. So that's part of what bothers me about it. But you know what really haunts me about all of this, Margot, is that among other things, that means that people, even if they get the benefit, much less while they're waiting for it, a lot of people just can't get to the medical care they need or afford it, even if they can get to the doctor, if they have to pay a copay for the prescription or even just the transportation costs. I think there are a lot of people out there just not getting needed medical treatment who are very sick or very injured. Is that right?
Well, that's true too. And imagine if you're the stress that's involved and the, you know, the poverty that's involved when you have no income coming in. And one of the people who commented on my story after it was published was a guy who told me that his sister was bipolar, and she waited 2 years. She was waiting 2 years to get a hearing, and she finally committed suicide last month.
Yeah, it's just tragic. It must have been
just in 2017. 10,000 people have died while they're on the waiting list, and that's up from 8,000 a couple of years ago. So, I mean, people are dying, and people are getting sicker while they're waiting for their benefits.
Well, I think we as a country should be ashamed of those statistics. We should be ashamed of the stories like those of the people you told who did their part and you know, did what they were supposed to, and instead are facing tragedy and poverty and misery because of the decisions of some people who aren't looking out for them. So there's a lot I could say about that, but let's just leave it there. Margot Roosevelt, journalist, thank you for this article in the Orange County Register, and thank you for your insights, and thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you. I just want to add that if you want a lot more information, statistics, and case studies, just go to ocregister.com/Social Security.
Okay, that's great. ocregister.com/Social Security, right?
Thank you.